So in this segment, there is a lot to talk about. To be fair, this is ironic. Sorry, this has just caught my eye. That the UK is facing, by the looks of things, a fuel shortage. Now, originally, from what we heard, it was about 20 BP pumps that had shortages and were closed. But then what happened was people are told not to panic buy. And what happens when you tell people not to panic buy? They panic buy. We saw it last year with the loo roll. Let's hope we don't go through that again. But again, it's just one of those things where you never tell people not to panic buy. You never tell people that there's no crisis because they don't believe you. Because why would you say it? Why are you saying there's no problem when people are like, oh my god, there is a slight problem, and what happens is you exacerbate the issue, you make it worse. No one should ever pretend the public is that intelligent, especially because once a small group of people start panic buying, everyone does, because there's a chance you won't have it. You won't have whatever people are panic buying, be it food, loo roll, but something as important as fuel. When we live in a country where, for the most part, at least, especially where I live, you need a car to get around. If you don't have a car, you can't get anywhere because the public transport sucks. It sucks. So again, the UK's tactic to combat this, because I just saw this story yesterday, which is we're going to allow up until Christmas they're going to give out 5,000 visas for lorry drivers, and I think it's like 5,000 something visas for meat processors. That's very generous of you, government. 5,000 HGV visas when we have 100,000 lorry driver shortage and they can only work here till Christmas. Do you think anyone's going to take you up on that offer? Are you stupid? A temporary visa scheme to make it easier for foreign lorry drivers to work in the UK to run for 3 months, ending on Christmas Eve. So once Christmas Eve kicks in, you're out. You can't work anymore. Do you think anyone's going to take you up on your offer? Are you stupid? I think they've done this on purpose because they're going to say, "Oh, you guys said you wanted lorry drivers on the shortage list, and none of them came." It's like, are you surprised? You can't set up like a house of cards and then get mad at other people when it falls down inevitably. A shortage of lorry drivers has disrupted fuel deliveries, with some petrol stations closing and queues forming. The government has said there is no fuel shortage at refineries and urged people not to panic buy. So what does that tell you? The issue isn't, the production of petrol. The issue is moving the petrol from the refineries to the petrol pumps. That's the main problem we're having right now. What's that caused by? A HGV driver shortage. Now, this is my speculation, but I wouldn't be surprised if the heavy goods vehicle, the lorry drivers that drive petrol to fueling stations have moved to go into other sectors of HGV driving, say working for supermarkets, because the ones that work for supermarkets have been getting, signing on bonuses and potential pay rises. I have not heard any stories about the drivers who drive around fuel getting pay rises. So it's possible that those drivers have moved into a different kind of, not sector, but a different kind of, like a vertical move, if that makes sense. So that would not surprise me at all. But we do have a lorry driver shortage now for, fuel drivers, essentially. And I think they need a specialist qualification, given how dangerous carrying around petrol is. Like, you crash that thing, we're in a world of trouble. So yeah, the president of the AA said panic buying rather than supply chain issues was driving the shortage of fuel at some petrol stations. Again, it's very interesting they would ask the president of the AA, who deal with insurance. How would they be an expert on fuel? That doesn't make sense. It looks like the BBC kind of cherry picked this quote. Edmund King added that the problem should pass in a matter of days if drivers only fill up when they need it. But that's not what's happening right now. The problem is people are panic buying, filling up jerry cans and carrier bags and all sorts. It's a joke. MPs and police forces have called on drivers to be sensible, to consider filling up another time and to avoid stockpiling fuel in jerry cans. But people aren't doing that. That's the problem. You can't rely on the common sense of British people. You cannot do it, because there are enough people to ruin the system in this country. That's the main problem you have. When you create a system that's built on individualism, what do you expect people are going to do? They're going to be selfish. That's what's happened here. You can't build a system of individualism and not expect people to be selfish. Or ridiculous. And MPs and the police, like, the only way you can enforce this is if you do rationing, like some petrol stations have done, where they cap you at £30. That's the only way to resolve this issue. Meanwhile, the continued shortage of hauliers threatens more disruption to deliveries of petrol, food, and other goods. And the other thing you've got to remember is, when there's a fuel shortage, if a lorry driver can't fill up on petrol, that's going to cause another problem of delivering goods elsewhere. If they have to drive further out to fill up their lorry, that's going to cause more delays. That's how important fuel is in this country. It's important in most countries, to be fair, but in the UK specifically, it's very important. We don't have a lot of freight railways to move stuff around. You're reliant on heavy goods vehicles. Trade Association Logistics UK estimates the UK is in need about 90,000 HGV drivers. Again, it's very odd the BBC have gone for this lower figure by Logistics UK rather than going for the Road Haulage Association figure of 100,000. So there are a lot of questions to be asked by the BBC or to the BBC here. With existing shortages made worse by a number of factors, including the pandemic, of course, Brexit, an ageing workforce, and low wages and poor working conditions. Now, let's look at these things, right? This one here, the pandemic, the government made worse, right? But that one can't be helped with regards to lorry driver tests. But they could have put that on one of the things that was allowed to go on because of how important HGV drivers are. The government failed to acknowledge that early on. Brexit, that's a government-made policy. You can straight blame that one because we could have kept freedom of movement. So yeah, that one straight on the government. An ageing workforce, partially on the government because they didn't make the conditions good enough for younger people to go into the industry because of high training costs and also low wages and poor working conditions, really bad hours. Those are things the government could have impacted. So again, most of this is on the government once again. And let's not blame Tony Blair for this one, saying that it's because too many people went to university. That's not the problem, G. The foreign drivers eligible for the visas will not be limited to the EU, but expectations are most of the drivers will be from Europe. That's because you still need to be able to get the lorries insured with the driver, and the issue with that is the EU have standardised testing, or at least there's a level of equivalency there. It's recognised if you've got an EU licence in the UK, and obviously if you have a licence from say further afield, say the United States or from Bangladesh or whatever, that's not going to be recognised in this country. A raft of longer-term measures, including training up more drivers. Again, it's going to take around 9 months to be trained as a lorry driver, so that's not going to happen anytime soon. And addressing the backlog of driving tests. How are you going to do that? Because that takes more lorry drivers out of the field because they have to help train the new crop. The only thing that the government could do is getting some of the ones who are looking at retiring into training to keep them on a bit longer and say, look, we know you want to retire, but if you work at your local lorry driving park or whatever to train up new recruits, that would be great, and you'd get paid this amount. That's the only way the government could really deal with that properly. But do we expect these guys to be able to be that smart? I don't know. And also to be introduced to by ministers. So Conservative MP Tobias Ellwood welcomed the introduction of the temporary visa, but said it would not help overnight. Well, obviously not, especially given the way that you guys spoke about foreigners in this country when you maligned them, attacked them, didn't give them the respect they deserved, and they went home. What do you expect? Sorry, didn't go home, went to another EU country potentially that actually welcomed them in. Because we know there's a shortage in the EU for lorry drivers. They're going to be very happy by this because now their shortage has gone down a bit, and whilst ours has gone up. So it's impacted the ambulance services. So you can see from here, like these guys are kind of jokes taking a picture. Jennifer Ward, a student paramedic of 3 years for Medicare EMS, which provides 999 frontline service support to the East of England ambulance service, said she had to travel to 5 petrol stations to get diesel for her ambulance. First of all, why are ambulances running diesel? Secondly, that's a joke, like going to 5 different petrol stations. Like, we already have a shortage of ambulances in this country, of, medical staff in this country. Like, the fact that, you've got drivers who need to spend time going, to 5 different petrol stations is a joke. She was eventually able to use the lorry pumps at a petrol station in Chelmsford. The 21-year-old said no patient care was delayed because of this. Ambulance was still being sent to jobs, but the thing is, there's a massive delay. There's a massive issue with just getting ambulances to people in general because of the massive cuts to the NHS from, you guessed it, the government. So once again, it's just a shambles. It's a shambles all round from the government. It was more anxiety of not knowing whether we can fill up. When you're on 3/4 of a tank, I could be sent anywhere. I could be sent to Norwich, and I could have no fuel. So at that point, do you call into back to HQ and say, look, we can't go to this place. You're gonna have to send another ambulance out because we don't have the fuel. Honestly, Matt McDonald, chief executive of the Medicare EMCF, said a member of staff cancelled their shift on Saturday because they had been unable to get fuel. Ambulance drivers were also struggling to get enough fuel for their shifts, he said. And that's a problem across the board, where if you don't have the fuel to get to a place and also get back to the hospital, you can't take that job on because that patient's going to be stuck in the ambulance, which is something you really don't want. So there's no clear, way to resolve this, but once again, it does show you how important, diesel and petrol are to the country, and that the government failed to respect, HGV drivers again, and the ramifications it's had on the industry, not just the industry, on the country, really. So we've got some more information here saying that Sainsbury's was experiencing high demand for fuel with a tiny proportion of sites closed. They don't give you the actual number though, do they? BP said 20 of its 1,200 forecourts were closed, with between 50 to 100 sites affected by the loss of one grade fuel. So that's not too bad, 20 out of 1,200, but 100 being impacted, up to 100 being impacted by the loss of one grade of fuel. So that would be probably unleaded. So you'd have to buy super unleaded if my knowledge of BP is right. So that's going to cost you a bit more. Not the worst thing in the world, but if you're a poorer person, someone with less money, that will impact you dramatically. A small number of Esso brands, branded Tesco refueling stations, have been impacted. It said Esso owner ExxonMobil. I didn't know ExxonMobil owned Esso. That's interesting. Learn something new every day. So the EG Group, which has 341 petrol stations, is introducing a limit of £30 per customer on all grades of fuel due to unprecedented customer demand. This is the right thing to do here, doing a limit on how much you can buy, because that will at least be fairer, just like they did with limits on how much rice and canned goods you could buy last year, because we are at a shortage. You do have to ration these things. Greg Hans said fewer than 1% of petrol stations were closed, and there was easily enough petrol available for normal use at this time of year. So you see, this is the phrase here, normal use, right? But we're not at a point where there's normal use for petrol. People are stockpiling this stuff. So there's the phrase there that tells you these people are frauds. It tells you everything you need to know. So we go to some analysis here from Vicky Young, who says this isn't a particular popular idea with cabinet ministers. That's mainly because these people kept pushing hire British people. We got a story coming out with ministers blasting firms, right, for asking for more foreign labour to be allowed in the country. So you've got that story that's going to come out at some point. I might move this one ahead because this one's important. Point being is that you have a situation where we have a dramatic shortage, and the government are like, why don't you just hire more British people, fam? Well, obviously they're not available. They're in training, or they don't want to do the job. It's not hard to figure out, guys, honestly. So relaxing those immigration rules, so here it is. That's because the new immigration system that came in after Brexit was all about saying to companies, you can't rely on cheap foreign labour anymore. You've got to focus on the workforce. But the thing is, right, if the government wanted to, they could have increased wages. They could have done a lot of things to get rid of this stigma around cheap foreign labour, which, in a lot of industries, it wasn't. It was just these companies. The companies did exploit people because they had enough labour to pay lower wages. But if the government was so concerned about these lower wages and these poor working conditions, they would have done a lot more to resolve the issues. Now they're once again asking industry to resolve issues which they were never prepared for in the first place. If the government had told these companies a year ago or whatever, look, we're going to end freedom of movement. That means no more lorry drivers coming in from the EU. You need to start training now. If the government had done that, we'd be in a much better position, rather than, it hitting March and companies realising, oh, wait, they're not going to U-turn on this. We need to start training British drivers. And it's like, well, people don't want to drive. British people don't want to become lorry drivers because of the crappy working conditions and pay. What happens now? And then, companies panicking, trying to poach staff from other companies, rather than having a system in place, a transitional period in place, where you tell companies, look, freedom of movement is ending. These key industries are going to be hit. You guys need to buck up now and start dealing with it. That's what should have happened if we were prepared for Brexit. But truth be told, we were never prepared. Relaxing those immigration rules now undermines that message. It could lead to other sectors saying they want special treatment too. We saw that in farming as well, where they had to do a lot of visas for farms to help them out, so that's not a surprise. Labour already saying, we told you about this, we said this would happen months ago. The question I'd ask is Labour is, what would you have done to resolve the issue? I'm going to hear crickets though, honestly. Not much more to be said about this article, so hopefully we didn't drag this one out too much. Oh, it's very long actually. But we see here, EU drivers set to snub Boris Johnson's appeal to solve the UK's petrol crisis with Brexit visa offer, so they're not going to come here anyways, by the looks of things. So I was going to cover this story initially. This was on the list to cover, but luckily the government had come to a conclusion before I hit the record button. But yeah, the FT covered this as well, where Johnson had given the go-ahead to ministers to relax immigration rules to allow more foreign truck drivers into the country. Evidently, Priti Patel is not going to be happy, especially if the driver looks like this, i.e. foreign. A big U-turn from the government here. They're on the brink of a U-turn. When was this tweet put out? The 24th. So it was a couple of days ago that the government were basically forced to do this. And so my point to the kind of audience is that this is what it took for the government to do a U-turn. It wasn't just, shortages on the shelves or, a shortage of other supplies that the country desperately needed, medicines and things like that. But it took a fuel shortage, an absolute crisis within the country for the government to U-turn on a policy which was unnecessary. Which was absolutely unnecessary. This is what it took, an absolute crisis for this government to act, which is something we've seen consistently from the government with lockdown 1, lockdown 2, and we're seeing it now with hospitals filling up. It takes an absolute crisis for the government to act, to do anything. They are very reactive. None of these people are proactive, and that's the point that I need to stress to the audience. For any Boris Johnson supporters out there, this guy, he doesn't know what he's doing. He only reacts at the last possible minute, really, to resolve an issue, and even then it's not enough. And on top of that, Christmas is going to be ruined. So I hope you guys are happy with that as well. Well done, guys, you killed Christmas. But you got James Cleverly saying there is no fuel shortage. You've got Transport Secretary Grant Shapps saying there's no fuel shortage and people should be sensible and fill up only when they need to. But the thing is, that's not happening right now. So you have to do something to resolve that. Just like when we saw the panic buying last year. People didn't buy normally because they were scared. They thought there was going to be a shortage. You had some people who were scalping, buying products to sell them on, but I don't think the vast majority of people were doing that. So the only smart thing the government can do is tell industries on the slide, go for rationing. Because I don't know if industry will do that, because in a sense this does benefit them, just selling off loads of petrol to people, because they're going to make a ton of money off this. And they can raise the prices slightly as well, because we have a shortage. When there's scarcity, that's when prices can go up. But yeah, an absolute joke from the government once again, and it's not going to resolve the issue, because why would you want to come to work for the UK for 3 months, right, with no job security really whatsoever, when you can continue to work in the EU and you don't have to worry about a lot of the issues you're going to face in the UK. You can work in the EU indefinitely until your country does their version of Brexit, if they ever do so. Or you could work in the UK until Christmas Eve, where you have to leave the country. Like, why would you want to do that? It doesn't make any sense. Realistically, these visas should be for people indefinitely, to be honest. But anyways, I'm going to leave it there. This video's gone on long enough. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Like, comment, share, subscribe, and hopefully I'll see you in the next one.